Okay, here's a question. Anybody can answer this that you know. What meteor shower peaks on or around Halloween?
Leonids, Taurids, fluids.
Your second, Rosie, your second answer was right. The Taurids.
Yes.
Okay, Taurids means what? Where does it get its name from?
Taurus.
The bull. Taurus the bull, yes. Okay, so what's the connection between this meteor shower?
Torrents of rain. There's a whole bunch of them that came down.
A whole bunch of what?
A whole bunch, a lot of them. Many of them.
Yes.
Shower of them.
Towards the rain, that sounds good.
Towards the rain.
It's like towards meteor, towards the rain, right?
No, that's torrents. Okay, the Taurid meteor shower. What is the comet that's associated with that Taurid meteor shower? We talked about it multiple times. You're not allowed to answer. Yeah, you're right, Brian. Enki. Comet Enki. Now, what distinguishes the Taurid meteor shower from all the rest of the meteor showers?
We go through it twice a year.
We go through it twice a year, yes. There are other meteor showers that we go through twice a year. The thing about the Taurid meteor shower is it's the largest scale meteor shower that we pass through. Most meteor showers, the Earth passes through them within 1 to 3 days. The Taurid shower takes about 3 weeks to pass through. It's a gigantic system, and astronomers are only just beginning to figure out what's in this system. And that's what's interesting. Okay, what object have we talked about repeatedly in here that is almost certainly part of that Taurid system?
Is it Tunguska?
Yes. The 1908 Tunguska. You've all heard that story, right? If you haven't,
Numerous times.
Okay, so what was the date?
1908?
Yeah, but when in 1908? See, that's significant.
That's a trick question.
That was in June.
June what?
18.
Okay, June 30th. Now, when I showed a slide, and I'm going to pull it up here in a second, as soon as I can get this thing open.
Something happened on the 19th or what was it?
End of the world.
Arcanium, that's interesting. Have we done that yet?
Which one?
I just saw something, Arcanium.
Arcanum. No, we haven't done that yet. Because that's,
interesting.
you know what Arcanum means?
No, but I'm intrigued.
Secret.
That's why.
So that's why we haven't done it yet. All right, we're ready to go, I think.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, hit me with it.
The vaguely connection that I'm thinking about is that if you had the Tunguska explosion, then you had all this changing of the atmospheres and stuff thrown up into the sky and the burning on. Did that by any chance bring something with it?
Well, were a couple of very distinguished a British and an Indian astrophysicists that came up with a theory about 25 years ago. And so far it would suggest that the evidence confirms that there's a high connection between outbreaks of various kinds of very strange plagues and visitations from things from space. Yes, indeed.
Well, that was the only thing I was going to ask you. How about the Black Plague coinciding with an asteroid or something?
Well, see, now that you bring that up, we'll digress for a minute. Only for a minute, because it fits in with what we're talking about.
Take my coat off. I'll stay
You might as well. Sit down, stay a while.
Popcorn, please.
The bubonic plague, the Black Plague, came in the wake of the Little Ice Age. With the plummeting global temperatures, the collapse of agriculture for several years in a row in Europe brought about malnourishment and famine, which diminished folks' immune system and made them susceptible to opportunistic diseases. Now, there's a couple of the British astronomers have been theorizing for about 20 years now that there was actually an increase of cometary activity between the 12th and 14th century. In fact, some of the stuff we're going to look at tonight is that very evidence. One of the consequences of this enhanced flux of comets into the solar system was the littering of near-Earth space with lots of this cometary sub-micron dust. The Earth sweeps through that stuff, and just like a big magnet, it accretes. And stuff comes into the atmosphere, and the significant thing about this sub-micron dust is that it's opaque to the shortwave infrared radiation coming in from the sun, but it's transparent to the long wave heat coming back off the Earth. So it has a double consequence. It blocks out the heat being delivered by the sun from outside, but then the heat that's re-radiating off the Earth, actually that was infrared. The infrared coming back off the Earth that's longer wavelength passes back out through this canopy of this cometary dust, and so it produces a double cooling, Randy. It produces a feedback loop that ends up with the Earth cooling. Now, on two separate groups of scientists, you've got one studying the climate that sees that going from the medieval warm period, when the Vikings were farming up in Greenland where it's now permafrost, and there was a flourishing wine industry in England 300 and 400 miles further north than grapes even grow now, that was terminated by this cooling that occurred over a period of perhaps within 10 years, 10 to 20 years. With this cooling, there was several years where there were extremely brutal winters and very short, cold summers that were extremely damp and rainy, and it caused collapse of agriculture in Europe, which led to malnourishment and famine, and shortly thereafter is when these great disease plagues took over. Well, the interesting thing could be, what you're saying, Dennis, there may be an implication. Fred Hoyle and Chandra Wickramasinghe were the two astrophysicists that were studying comets for many, many years, and concluded that, and now it's pretty much confirmed, that comets are loaded with organic material. Yes.
But wouldn't the extreme heat and the extreme cold of being out in space kill any kind of biological?
Here's the thing. You've got to picture the comets are like, they're packages that are deep frozen. Whatever is in a comet is if it's living, it's in a hibernating type of state, in this state of deep freeze. But they're also microorganism life that is known as extremophile, which means simple life, we now know, can live under extreme conditions of heat and cold and pressure. It's the higher life forms, like Hoyt, for example, that can only live within a very limited range.
We have to talk to him about that.
What, you had a comment?
No, I just said Hoyt, yeah. Pointing in my direction.
I saw Hoyt waving his hand over there. So
they found them people down in a cave, something like 3-4 miles down. Found a lot of life here just a while back.
Yeah, but
they said they've been down there several million years and they were still viable.
Yeah, Randall, if you're familiar with somatives, you know, like the Wright called them bions or Nassens called them somatives. Those things will survive even white hot temperatures, and I mean it's everything that's alive has those in them. It's
so
nanoparticles.
It is not impossible that primitive life can be delivered around the universe by means of comets.
Would those extremophiles, though, infect a human body? Or would they be
that's
compatible
the question. And
to infecting
Hoyle and
us?
Wickramasinghe studied it and concluded that it was possible. And they were associating...
Well, but we're not extreme. We're, like, temperate.
We are, right.
Yeah, but they have to be...
But that's not to say what something like that's going to do if it invades our organism and gets in our organism. Okay. But again, what seemed to be the two things that happened side by side was, cometary volatiles are being delivered to Earth all the time. Every time we pass through a meteor, we just pass through the Leonids. So whatever cometary volatiles are issuing from Comet Tempel-Tuttle are in that stream. We pass through that stream on the 17th of this month. Okay, so Earth is constantly accreting these cometary volatiles. Now, whether or not they affect us may depend on other factors. Now, what we had with the plague, the Black Plague, was that you had this cooling of the global temperature, and food, the whole food growing and distribution system collapsed because people didn't have storage of food. And you had like a couple of years in a row, like in the late 1300s, I've forgotten the exact years, where essentially there was no crops harvested because it was so cold. And that could be what opened the door. By getting people weak and having the human immune system, which can normally deal with stuff like that, falling in a weakened state, and at the same time you perhaps have this enhancement of this stuff into the Earth's atmosphere, working together might be what it requires to create one of these catastrophic plague situations where millions of people are killed. Yes, Dennis?
Now, you say we go through this lineage around November the 17th? Or
The Leonids.
Leonid, well, Brezhnev, all right. So,
The Brezhnev?
Brezhnev.
so it comes out like November the 17th, right? And
Yes.
we tend to go through these things?
Yeah.
Is that not the onset of the flu season as far as the government? and
Well,
other
it's
people
true.
concerned?
That's an interesting, yeah.
Instead of what?
The flu season.
What about that comet that it has?
Comet Holmes.
Kind of
The-
expanded like some fierce like in the last month or so.
Comet Holmes. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to really study up on that one yet. You got some information, Lou?
Not on that, but something else.
Oh,
I was listening to Coast to Coast last night, and the authors of the book Thunderbolts of the Gods, I forgot their names, they talk about the universe being electric. The electric.
Oh,
They
okay.
said that the comets were not hunks of ice, that the comets are actually pieces of maybe other planets that have, because of the electrical explosions, have broken off. But they're not hunks of ice. That's what their research shows.
Well, comets are, to use the big term, heterogeneous, which means that they're composed of lots of things. We know it was Fred Whipple that referred to them as dirty snowballs. They've kind of modified that to now they're more referring to them as snowy dirt balls. But in either case, they run the gamut. There's no one prototypical type of comet that all the other comets are like that. They're extremely diverse lot. Some that are almost pure water ice, and others that are almost more like asteroids that are basically just frozen together. You know, and probably the best thing to do is to just show you here. Here we go. Comet. Celestial body moving about the sun in an elongated orbit, usually consisting of a central mass, the nucleus, surrounded by a misty envelope, the coma. Which actually I think it's pronounced coma in referring to comets. Which extends into a stream, the tail, in the direction away from the sun. Now notice what the derivation, the etymology of the word. In Middle English it comes from kometa, which comes from the Greek, which is a modification of kometes, which means long-haired. As we go through this, the important thing is, in order to read the symbolic language, as it turns out, comets are one of the fundamental archetypal symbols that recur over and over again in ancient symbolism. Because what has become apparent is this fact, is that the flux of comets into the zone occupied by Earth is not constant. It varies quite dramatically over time. So that there may be times when it's typical to look at the sky at any given time and see 2 or 3 comets, or perhaps more, and to go for years and not have a time when there is a comet absent from the sky. On other times, the comets disappear. This whole school of British neo-catastrophists that I've been talking about has been working on this, and they believe that there is a galactic modulating force that directs the comets from the zone where they're found outside the planetary sphere. And what's that zone called? The spherical shell, remember?
The Kuiper belt.
Well, the spherical shell is the Oort cloud. Within that is a flattened belt that generally follows the plane of the planets, and that is called the Kuiper belt or Kuiper disk. If you remember the scenario, the assumption is every star is surrounded by this spherical shell of cometary mass, which interestingly, on a scale, is the same to its relation to the sun as an electron shell is to the neutron forming the nucleus of an atom. That's just a little aside. But if you were to take an atom and blow it up so it's like a single, with a single nucleus of say a neutron and a proton to the size of the sun, the first electron shell would be at the same distance as the Oort cloud.
That's cool.
That is cool. But now the theory is this, is that as our solar system is moving through the galaxy, there is a dark matter in the galaxy that weaves in and out around the galactic plane. In these zones of dark matter, there's a great concentration of mass. So when our solar system passes through one of these zones of concentrated mass, what happens is these comets, which are very delicately balanced between our sun and the nearest stars, get jostled. And when they get jostled, they tend to begin to migrate towards the nearest gravitational attraction. If that's our sun, what they begin to do is they begin to make a long multi-million year journey that takes them spiraling in towards the plane of the ecliptic, where they would settle out in what's known as the Kuiper disk. Now, at the Kuiper disk begins, the inner rim of the Kuiper disk begins just beyond Neptune. So you've got the bigger outer planets. The alignments of these larger outer planets, when Uranus and Neptune particularly align, their combined gravitational force is enough to again jostle the comets that are on the inner rim of the Kuiper disk. Those comets then begin a long spiraling journey in towards the sun. That journey may take anywhere from 10 to several 100,000 years. Now, we have a twofold mechanism here. We have a galactic mechanism modulating the influx of comets from this outer shell down to this disk that surrounds the planet. Then we have the alignments of the outer planets, which then draw in those comets and send them in hurtling towards the sun, where they break up and be producing meteor streams and multiple generations of smaller comets, and potentially become Earth crossers. Now, the ancient peoples knew about all of this, and they encoded their science, showing that they knew this whole process. And that's what we're going to be looking at. I introduced you to the idea last time that Halloween was actually an ancient memory of a cometary encounter that was associated with the Taurid meteor stream, which the Earth crosses twice each year. It crosses it in late June, it crosses it in early November. In late June, it crosses as the stream is coming away from the sun. In November, it crosses it as the stream is moving towards the sun. So the Tunguska object that struck Earth, or at least struck the Earth's atmosphere in 1908, was a morning meteor, a morning object. It came from the sun. People didn't see it until the last few seconds, because in fact some of the people, the witnesses, said it looked like it came off the sun. It looked like the sun threw off a piece of itself, because it appeared to be coming from that direction when people first saw the thing. Whereas the Halloween meteors are coming from the opposite direction. They're coming from the nighttime direction. That's why when you go out at midnight, if you remember what I told you to do, go out October 31st, November 1st, November 2nd, and you look at the culminating point, which, let me see, we get oriented. South is where?
South right there.
South is, yeah, okay, south is this way.
This house sits 7 degrees off of south.
Okay, so I'm looking due south now. If I draw a meridian line from the South Pole to the North Pole, and it passes directly overhead, then the Pleiades will be rising at about, well, they're crossing the meridian at midnight. So that means that 1/4 of the way around. That was 6 hours. Yeah, so yeah, late afternoon.
Yeah,
Late afternoon, they're rising in the east. At midnight on October 31st, they're due south. The Pleiades. So what's the connection with the Pleiades? Well, when you look at the Taurid meteor shower, all meteor showers are named for what? What gives it, when you talk about the Leonids or the Taurids or the Geminids, the constellation that they appear to be coming from in space. That's where they get their name. So the Leonids appear to be coming from what constellation? Sure. How about, here's a tough one, how about the Geminids?
Gemini.
How about the Aquarids?
Well, gee.
Okay, so you get the point.
It's the radiant.
The radiant, yes. And let's just,
Well, now, as our moon, or as our planetary system moves through the great year, does that change any? The direction that they would come in?
yes.
Because we would be influenced by other planetary.
What would change is their elevation from the horizon.
That's the only thing would change in the great year.
Well, yes and no. The Earth's changing tilt is not going to change the direction that they appear to come from in space.
Okay.
However, the meteor streams themselves can be perturbed by close planetary encounters. So that, and actually the radiant of the Taurid, his shower, has been shifting. 5,000 years ago, the radiant of the Taurid shower was closer to Aries than it was to Taurus. So the radiant point itself can drift through space.
Randall, can I jump back to Halloween for 2 minutes?
Sure, please do.
Because a bunch of people weren't here, so I was asking the family over Thanksgiving if they would name, a bunch of the things that were traditionally associated with Halloween. So, the whole list that we came up with last time, the ghosts and the goblins and the witches and the brooms and the, the Grim Reaper and on and on. So the one thing that I couldn't explain, though, they came up with pumpkin. So do you know where the pumpkin came in? Is that more recent, or is that,
well,
because all these other
the
things that
key
were
to
symbolism
is realizing
for comets.
that the pumpkin is actually a substitute for the rutabaga.
Okay, well, they wouldn't have listened to that.
You ponder that one for a while.
Sounds like more horrendous genetic engineering.
That's wisdom.
No, actually, I think there could be something to that pumpkin business. Because, okay, what do they do?
Well, the jack-o'-lantern more than the pumpkin.
What you have to do is go to the legend of the jack-o'-lantern and what the origin of that was.
Okay.
And I'm serious, they used to carve rutabagas into jack-o'-lanterns. But then they discovered that pumpkins carved a whole lot easier than rutabagas. So they shifted sometime around the 16 or 1700s. Well, here are a list of some of the more well-known meteor streams, each one associated with a particular comet, its date, and you'll notice we just passed through the Leonids, and I don't know if any of you guys went out, a few years ago. The Leonids, as it says there, is Temple Tuttle, and Temple Tuttle has a... what you have to picture is this. The comet comes in, it's going around the sun, and as it's going around the sun, it's breaking into a lot of pieces. And pieces are, outer parts of it are spalling off like litter and creating this meteor stream. And the older the meteor stream is, the more dispersed that material is going to be uniformly in the stream around the sun. The younger it is, the more concentrated it's going to be. So there are going to be clumps and clusters of stuff. And so the Leonids, I don't know if you remember, but in 1998, 1999, 2000, we were passing the meteor stream close to a clump. And so we saw some, if you went out and were doing meteor observations, you had a chance of seeing, perhaps 5 to 10 times more than you normally would. Now, in several years past, the Leonids have been so intense that people thought it was the end of the world. I mean, they would go out, and at any given time there would be 200 to 300 meteors visible in the sky at one time. And I can't even imagine what that would be like. But the same thing happened with the Draconids, Draco. Now you'll notice October 7th through 9th, the radiant of the Draconids is in Draco, the dragon. I don't know how well you guys know your astronomy. There's a lot more than this. And then you've got the Eta Aquarids, which is Halley's Comet. Now, an interesting thing about and then there's the Aretids, but I don't show them. The Aretids may have one time been part of the Taurid system. Now, the Taurid system that I was talking about is the largest and most diffuse and probably the oldest of these. And it almost certainly is the byproduct of the disintegration of a gigantic comet that, according to astronomers that have studied it, probably entered into this inner solar system perhaps 20 to 25,000 years ago. Which date is interesting because around 25,000 years ago was when the last great expansion of the Ice Age took place, what is known as the Late Wisconsin, when the glaciers grew massively all over the world between 20 and 25,000 years ago. So when I first learned about the Taurids perhaps being the result of this giant comet that came into the solar system perhaps 25,000 years ago, I began to suspect, well, maybe there's a connection with why the planet plunged into the last great ice age at the same time. And then that ice age lasted until 10,000 years ago. And now, as I've been showing you in here, there's evidence that the Earth got pummeled pretty seriously around 10 to 12,000 years ago, and it was that probably brought us out of the Ice Age. In fact, without that pummeling, we may still be in the Ice Age, because the physics of an Ice Age are such that once the planet goes into it, there's no real reason why it should come out, given the absence of some external input that forces it out. Because of the fact that once all that ice grows, it's reflecting enormous amounts of heat back into space that would ordinarily be absorbed by the Earth. And so once that ice gets in place, it should have like a feedback effect that causes further cooling of the atmosphere and further growing of the ice sheets. In fact, some of you may have heard of the snowball Earth theory, which has gained credibility. There have been times in the past when the entire Earth may have frozen right down to the equator. And that would be one of these runaway ice ages. So one of the mysteries of ice ages is once they start, how is it that we get out of one? Well, absent an external input, it's difficult to come up with a mechanism that would get us out of one. On the other hand, external inputs, as I have suggested, may be the thing that not only put us into the ice age, but got us out of the ice age. And the other point that I was about to make is that on the larger time scales, what the model now seems to be gaining credibility is that there are periods of time when the flux of comets to the inner solar system is way more than what we've seen during historical times. And the corollary of that may be that our historical times is simply due to the fact the reason we have been able to accumulate and preserve a history at all is because our history is essentially a barometer of the times when the flux of comets to Earth has been low enough that we've been able to enjoy a few thousand years of stability. And within that window of stability, we were able to create civilization. Now, what the neo-catastrophists are basically speculating, and not speculating without a lot of evidence to support it, is that these periods of times, essentially what you have is, with these planetary alignments, you will have a flux of anywhere from several dozen to maybe 100 or more comets that come into the inner solar system. And it takes them 10 to 20,000 years to essentially all disintegrate and get turned into zodiacal dust, or swept up by the planets, or fall into the sun, or get kicked back out of the solar system. That would be the fate. Okay, now, between these times, between the influx to the solar system, the clearing out, and the next influx, there will be episodes where the background amount of cosmic material is at a peak, and other times when it's low. And when it's at a peak, these are the times when we begin to see the great convulsive changes occurring on Earth. the climate changes, the biological changes, the mass extinctions, the rising and fallings of sea levels, spasms of worldwide volcanism. All of these things now seem to be associated with an extraterrestrial tempo, which seems to be related to the frequency with which comets are delivered into Earth-crossing orbits. Now, where are we now? That becomes the question, the paramount question in this whole thing. And as I've been trying to present the evidence in here, we have not warranted taking our own future stability for granted. And that's why I have, constantly expressed somewhat of my dismay at the current fears over global warming, because from what I have been studying in the last couple of decades, which suggests to me that the human input is minuscule compared to the cosmic input. Just minuscule, almost to the point where it fades into nothing next to the cosmic inputs that we know have happened over and over again. And that's what I want to keep emphasizing here. Also the fact that science has demonstrated that plausibility. At the same time, we get this ancient legacy of myths and traditions, which is basically telling us the same damn thing, just using different language to tell us exactly the same story.
Well, isn't it a historical fact that before every ice age there's always a global warming?
I don't know about every ice age, but prior to the late Wisconsin, 25,000 years ago, 30 to 50 years ago and back to the 19th century, the assumption was that the last ice age was 100 or 200,000 years long. Steady, unbroken ice.
Freeze.
20,000, 30,000 years to gradually come out of it, right? Well, then radiocarbon dating comes along, and what happens with radiocarbon dating? Radiocarbon dating shows that there were forests growing in Canada under where the middle of the ice sheet was supposed to be 25 and 30,000 years ago. So what happens to this concept, the model of a long unbroken ice age? Well, if we assume that there's an ice cap covering 2/3 of North America and almost 100% of Canada, with its 3-mile thick center over Hudson Bay, and it's been there 100,000 years, what the hell are forests doing growing there 25,000 years ago? You see the problem.
Might be on top of the ice, you can't hurt that.
Well, see, what's obvious now is that ice ages have come and gone a hell of a lot faster than anybody even imagined.
Well, then what you're basically
ago.
saying that a comet can cause an ice age and a comet can bring us out of an ice age.
That's what I'm saying.
Was it warm before the previous ice age?
It was, okay, so between roughly 25,000 and 50,000 years ago, it appears that it was probably almost as warm as it is now. And the other piece of evidence that would confirm that would be a study of sea level. Because you know what happens when the ice mass grows, right? The ice forms, what happens? All of that ice, like during the last ice age, we're talking 6 to 8 million cubic miles of ice. We're talking about double the amount of ice that now covers the South Pole, growing over Northern Europe, Greenland, North America, right? Okay, so as that ice grows, here's sea level going down 400 feet or more. When the ice melts, sea level comes back up. Now, ponder for a minute. In the scenarios of global warming, we're essentially talking about the catastrophe that would happen if sea level rose 1 or 2 feet. Well, 10 to 12,000 years ago, sea level rose 400 feet. What effect did that have on the prevailing order of the world at that time, if sea level came up 400 feet? Well, think of it in reverse. Sea level drops 400 feet. What's going to happen? What's the coastline going to do if sea level drops 400 feet?
Well, if you
It's
can walk from the United States.
going to migrate. It's going to migrate seaward, isn't it? In the case of where we're at here in Georgia, it's going to be, you're going to find that 400-foot bathymetric contour at about 50 or 60 miles off. You could go down there to Savannah, and if you were there during the Ice Age, where you're standing with the tide lapping at your feet, you'd be in the middle of a forest, and you'd have to go another 50 or 60 miles east to get to the coastline.
Well, you could walk from Alaska to Russia. that was all open then too.
Yes. Well, you could walk from Alaska to Russia. Siberia and North America were joined.
That's right.
They were joined by a landmass bigger than Alaska. They talk about the Bering Land Bridge, and you hear that, and you might first picture this narrow strip of land. No, the strip of land was almost double the width of Alaska. North America and northeastern Asia were effectively one continent during the Ice Age. Now, how different is that? Okay, so here we are. This is what we learned. This is the one of the major cosmic lessons, along with Tunguska in 1908. This back in 1994. You remember Shoemaker-Levy 9, and what we learned there.
The second one that hit Jupiter.
Yes, 21 pieces, and there's a photograph of the 21 pieces, known as the string of pearls. Here was 21 pieces. That was what you see there is a string of 21 comets. And what this is a second generation from a comet that was before it passed so close to Jupiter that Jupiter's intense gravity field ripped it apart. It was one comet. Now it's 21 smaller comets.
Okay.
But every one of those smaller comets, any one of them could strike Earth if striking Earth would cause a global catastrophe. And 21 of them struck Jupiter in 1994. And we were able to witness it. Now, this was something that if you talk to most astronomers before this event happened, they would say, oh, well, it's possible that comets could split, and it's possible that they could hit planets, but we'll never see that in our lifetime, because this is something that only happens on a scale of, once maybe every 100,000 years or something. Well, then, sure enough, it happened. And interestingly, the same guys that I keep referring to, this British school of neo-catastrophists, wrote a book about exactly this happening in 1980, where they were talking about maybe the real danger to planets is not the big random single impacts, but what happens when the comets break up and produce a shower of things, where you might have multiple impacts. And most of the rest of the astronomical community said, yeah, these guys are crackpots. But after this, nobody accused them of being crackpots anymore. Here we are. This is what we learned. This is the one of the major cosmic lessons, along with Tunguska in 1908. This back in 1994. You remember Shoemaker-Levy 9, known as the string of pearls. Here was 21 pieces. That was what you see there is a string of 21 comets. But every one of those smaller comets, any one of them could strike Earth if striking Earth would cause a global catastrophe. And 21 of them struck Jupiter in 1994. And we were able to witness it. Now, this was something that if you talk to most astronomers before this event happened, they would say, oh, well, it's possible that comets could split, and it's possible that they could hit planets, but we'll never see that in our lifetime, because this is something that only happens on a scale of, once maybe every 100,000 years or something. Well, then, sure enough, it happened. And interestingly, the same guys that I keep referring to, this British school of neo-catastrophists, wrote a book about exactly this happening in 1980, where they were talking about maybe the real danger to planets is not the big random single impacts, but what happens when the comets break up and produce a shower of things, where you might have multiple impacts. And most of the rest of the astronomical community said, yeah, these guys are crackpots. But after this, nobody accused them of being crackpots anymore. And here are the pieces. Took almost a week for all 21 pieces to hit Jupiter. And then subsequent to that, astronomers started taking a closer look at planetary surfaces, and they started finding evidence of these cosmic machine gun blasts. If you count carefully, you'll see that there were 13. Quick succession.
Those are pretty darn close.
Yeah, so they broke up very soon before the impact, because had any amount of time elapsed, they would have spread out in space, and the impacts would have been much further apart.
Is that the moon?
Could have been one.
This is the moon. Yes, this is the moon.
Interesting, 13 and 21 are Fibonacci numbers.
Yep. Here's another one. They're showing up on all the solid planetary surfaces in the inner solar system. These crater chains are now starting to show up. And you've seen this, so I won't spend any time on this. Some of you have probably not seen this. This was an object, a cosmic object, skipping off the atmosphere back in, I think it was 73 or 74. It was in the 70s anyway. This is the Tetons, and the astronomers that looked at this estimated that the size of that thing was about 100 feet in diameter, which makes it 2/3 the size of the Tunguska event. The Tunguska object was about 150 feet in diameter. When it came into the atmosphere, it exploded with the force of a giant hydrogen bomb. This was only 2/3 the size, but it would have exploded had it been at a slightly different angle. And instead of skipping off the atmosphere, plunged into the atmosphere, it would have exploded probably with the force of about 1,000 of the bombs that were dropped over Hiroshima to end World War II.
That picture probably would have been much different then, right?
What?
That picture would have been much different then, right?
It probably would. In fact, if something like that had happened over the western United States in the 1970s, I would imagine it would have pretty dramatically altered human consciousness about the reality of this whole thing that I'm talking about here. And this, of course, this is 15 years old, so it's almost obsolete. But what you have here is the orbit of Mercury, Venus, and here's the Earth. And these red lines represent 15 years ago the identified Earth-crossing objects. And this actually has about doubled since then, the number of identified objects. It's estimated that the number of objects so far identified is probably somewhere between 5 and 15% of the total. So this illusion that we once had a generation or two ago of Earth being in this vast empty nothingness, that's not the model anymore. In fact, it turns out that the solar system is a cosmic zoo, and there's all kinds of critters that live in this cosmic zoo, and quite frequently, a whole lot more frequently than anybody had imagined, Earth encounters these cosmic critters with a variety of different kinds of consequences.
And that's still only the ones that are a kilometer or bigger, or a half a kilometer or bigger.
Yes.
You know, there's plenty of smaller ones that have been around too.
Right. Now remember, the Tunguska object blew up with the force of a large hydrogen bomb, and it was 150 feet in diameter. What would an object say that's 1,000 feet in diameter do?
Well, it would be another catastrophe like right there, the late Cretaceous.
Well, it wouldn't be. The late Cretaceous was the one certified impact crater associated with the late Cretaceous is the Yucatan Peninsula, and I'm going to show you a slide of it before we leave tonight. And it's about 170, 180 miles in diameter, and it's estimated that the object that struck, that created that crater, was 6 miles in diameter. Now this is what I'm talking about here, when there was, during these periods of intensified cometary flux, there may be multiple comets visible in the sky at any one time. And it is believed now that Earth was undergoing an episodic bombardment during the late Cretaceous when the dinosaurs were exterminated. That it wasn't just one impact, it was multiple impacts that took them down. And see, a lot of the critics of the theory said, yeah, but you've identified this iridium layer at 66 million years ago, but there's evidence that the dinosaurs were in decline several 100,000 years before that. Well, as it turns out, that big impact was probably only one of 6 or 10 or more impacts that clustered around the Cretaceous-Tertiary boundary. And the extinction may have not been one big, clean, fell swoop. It was something that was spread out over a much longer period of time, resulting from multiple impacts rather than one. And you see, each one of these comets has the potential to spall apart and produce offspring, just like you saw Shoemaker-Levy 9 do.
Did you say the iridium layer?
The iridium layer,
So
yes.
when we find very rare elements, it's often because of celestial impacts.
Exactly. And that was the clue that they first discovered back in the late 70s, associated with the layer, the Cretaceous Tertiary layer, which was the boundary marker across which dinosaurs didn't survive. And right at that layer, capping it, was this cosmic dust. This is what I was talking about, the Oort cloud, the spherical shell surrounding presumably most stars, certainly surrounding our own sun, and it's comprised of billions of comets. Now we got to imagine here that this distance here might be several light years out away from the sun. And the whole planetary system is concentrated way down here at the center. And if we zoom in and take a closer look, see, then we'll see the inner zone of the Oort cloud, and then we have this Kuiper belt, which is this flatter area, also consisting of billions of comets. And if you look here, you'll see that here's the planetary orbits. So this zone of comets exists just outside the planetary orbits, and it's the alignments, this is the theory now, and it makes sense, that the alignments of the outer planets are essentially, when they combine their gravitational force fields, they suck in the comets from the inner zone of the Kuiper disk. And that's what sends them on their journey sunward. And then, of course, they become Earth crossers, or potentially Earth crossers. Or the large comets break up and produce multiple small comets.
There's supposed to be a big lineup around 2050 or 2055, isn't there?
Planetary alignment?
Right. There's supposed to be 4 or 5 of the planets will be within a zone to do that.
Okay.
I think 2050, 2055, right along in there is what I've read.
Okay. Now, after Halley came through last time, we did some of our most intimate comet studies on the Halley nucleus, and what we discovered, now the Halley nucleus is about 25 miles in diameter, which is large but not that big. A cometary nucleus can be up to 100 miles in diameter. And in a cross section, this is kind of what it is. It's a lot of heterogeneous material frozen into this icy matrix. Now, if you have a 50-mile in diameter comet, each of these objects is a potential planetary killer, the large ones that are 1 to 5, or say 1 to 10 miles in diameter. Then you have the smaller stuff, like an object the size of a Tunguska. If this was a 50-mile thing here, an object the size of Tunguska would be one of the specks.
One of the dots?
One of the little dots, yeah. You know, you can imagine if a comet nucleus like this comes in and begins to disintegrate, what it can do to the zone of space through which the Earth is passing. And see, the realization that this is part of the natural conditions of life on planet Earth just hasn't dawned on people till the last decade or two. And still, it's only a small handful of scientists that have really grasped the implications of this. Everybody else on the planet is proceeding along in happy oblivion to the cosmic reality that we're faced with and that our ancestors on this planet were confronted with numerous times. And in fact, you know, a corollary now or byproduct of the insights gained by the School of British Neo-Catastrophism is historical catastrophism, and the realization that many of the past civilizations on this planet disappeared not because of, you know, internal strife or political this or sociological that, but they were actually wiped out in natural disasters caused by encounters with things from space. Now, 10 or 20 years ago, you proposed such an idea, and all the critics would laugh and say, that sounds like a Star Trek episode. Well, the difference between now and, say, 20 or 25 years ago is that there's a huge amount of evidence that basically shows the Star Trek episode may be closer to reality than this steady state, quiet vision of things that the critics were imagining was the case. And they imagined that only because during the last few centuries it has been relatively quiet, cosmically speaking.
Randall,
Yes.
has anybody done a calculation on the mass of the Oort cloud?
Yeah. And I don't recall what it is, but it's a lot of stuff out there.
Well, that doesn't.
I mean, it's not greater than the mass of the sun.
Well, still, doesn't that raise the problem if every star has one of those? You have to account for where it came from.
Yeah, well, it's left over. It's the byproduct. It's left over from the creation of the solar system, is the general theory. because that's material that didn't accrete into planets.
You know, I'm sure you know that the Raj and the temple in Jerusalem that everybody's fighting over, they have a rock in the middle, and they're
It's
all
a meteorite.
asteroids. Yeah, they're
It's a
meteorite.
meteorite,
Yeah.
yeah.
Both
Well,
of
yeah,
them.
see, ancient peoples held rocks from space
And
in
holy.
high veneration,
Yeah.
yes. These are the larger objects, the asteroidal objects, and you can see the census. The first one was discovered in 1801, and by 1999, 400 of the near-Earth objects were known, and the current estimate number of near-Earth objects is 1,500. Now, it's possible that at least half of these 1,500 near-Earth objects are the devolatilized nuclei of comets. You'll notice in this last figure here, you see what's happening up here? Comet nuclei have lots of volatile gases in them, and as they come into the sun, when they're out in deep space, they're in hibernation, they're in deep freeze. But as they come in towards the sun, they ignite, they come alive, and they start spewing off stuff. This is when they create this long gaseous tail that always points away from the sun. It's the gases coming off. Well, it could be that a lot of these near-Earth objects are in effect chunks of comet nuclei that are still rotating in the inner solar system. And we'll speed through this because at least half of you have seen this already, but we were talking earlier, we mentioned about the Bering Land Bridge. This map shows, you can see Alaska and Siberia. Well, the white part was the part that was exposed during the last ice age. So you can see all of this here. All of this here was land. All of this was land that's now under the ocean. And the bizarre part of it is that while you had this huge ice cap over North America, Siberia appears to have been warmer than it is now. There's a conundrum that's hard to explain.
Well, that's where the large migration took place about 40,000 years ago then.
Well, what you had up there, and now, the greatest concentration of extinct mammoth remains are found along the coastline of the Arctic Ocean. Because the most densest populated area of animal life on Earth during the Ice Age was northern Siberia. And there were herds of thousands and thousands of mammoths living where now the largest plant is 2 inches tall. Of course, they found the remains of forests frozen into permafrost. Clearly an indication of some kind of catastrophe. And here are arrows that are showing the path of entry of the object which blew up. This was the 1908 object. And essentially, I think this one is now considered to be the most accurate. Yeah, I believe it's this one. It's now considered to be the most accurate. And if you follow this, I've got to do a better graphic, but if you follow this kind of kidney-shaped or butterfly-shaped, that represents the area of devastation, tree devastation. Here is the most famous picture taken, and this is taken over 20 years after the explosion, when Leonid Kulik finally got there. He was the first scientist to get to the site of the explosion, over 20 years after it happened. So when he got there, after tremendous hardship, because it was very far removed, he discovered that for as far as the eye could see, this great taiga forest had just been mown over, like grass by a giant mower. Millions and millions of trees just completely flattened or stripped of their branches. And there's just so many bizarre things about this story. But we've covered in here, and I'm not going to reiterate all of it tonight because I'm trying to get on to some new stuff. You can see here, let me find some under the epicenter, they found a whole series of shallow elliptical depressions. Now, this is a key piece of evidence because, remember, what was different between the Tunguska object and a normal meteorite impact?
It exploded in the
This
air.
was it was an air explosion.
It was an air burst. It was an air burst. 5 miles up, it was an air burst. And it was this cone of intensely pressurized air came down, hit the forest, and just flattened it. Flattened it out in a radial pattern from the epicenter. But right under the epicenter were a series of these elliptical holes. Let me see if we can see some of them. You can see a few of them out there filled with water. And then right immediately under ground zero, there was nothing. It was just, everything was completely incinerated. It turned to ash and dust. Let me get through here. You can see some of these elliptical holes in some of these old photographs. And here's one of them. What was the significance of the elliptical holes?
It's probably particles.
Well, this is the only evidence imprinted into the landscape of this event. Normally, if you have a solid iron or stony object that hits the ground, it explodes and digs a big hole, like the famous crater in Arizona that you've seen pictures of. This didn't do that. This didn't hit the ground. It blew up in the air. The shock wave flattened the forest, but the shock wave where it hit the ground was so intense that it actually created these kinds of things. Now, the significance again of this is that if you're trying to identify ancient Tunguska type events where objects came in and exploded in the atmosphere, this is the only kind of thing that would be left in the landscape to look for. So where do we find elliptical shallow depressions in abundance?
North Carolina.
Carolina
That's right.
and Alaska.
You got it. You got it. So, anyways, let's go back to this area of devastation to give you a sense of the scale of the thing. Most of these are eyewitness accounts. Okay, here we go. Here's the same graphic again. And the epicenter of this would have been right here. And the trees go in a radial pattern this way. And this represents the limits of the forest blowdown. So everything within this ring right here was knocked flat. And we're essentially talking about 3-foot trees sheared off at their base, knocked over as if they were toothpicks. Now, here is a map of Atlanta, just to try to convey some sense of the magnitude of this. And of course, here's 285, and we're somewhere out right in here, right? We're at Smyrna. Okay. Now, what I've done is I've dropped that same butterfly of destruction in Siberia onto Atlanta for scale.
Whoa, we'd be in trouble.
Now, I think I put the epicenter somewhere about over Buckhead, roughly. Now you can see that in this case we would be where we're at, buildings wouldn't get knocked down, but if we were outside we would be knocked off our feet by the blast wave. Because the interesting thing is that the radius of destruction wasn't uniform in all directions. You can actually see that in some areas it extended farther than in other areas. But essentially this area here is larger or about the same size as the entire area within 285.
Did that not just have to do with topography?
That had a lot to do with it, the topography, because in some of those, I hurried through them, but in some of the photographs, actually you'd see, as you moved away from the epicenter, trees would start standing in the lee of the hillsides. So that the blast coming from the back knocked over all the trees on this side, but on the lee side, it left the trees standing. But now you got to remember, see, this is estimated to be the equivalent of explosion of about a 20 megaton hydrogen bomb, which is the largest bomb the U.S. ever had in its arsenal back in the early 60s was a 20 megaton bomb. So the largest bomb, hydrogen bomb, that the U.S. ever had in its arsenal deployed at any one time. We don't have nuclear weapons that magnitude deployed anymore. But it was about the same size. Now, Tunguska, I said, was an object about 150 feet in diameter. So this object here represents a baby, a cosmic baby. But you can see how much devastation it caused. If that thing blew up over Atlanta, you could easily assume a couple of million people are instantly annihilated. Buildings would be knocked down all the way down to the airport. People as far as Macon, Georgia would be knocked off their feet by the blast wave. That's how powerful it was. Now, what the British School of Astrophysicists, of neocatastrophists, is surmising is that they are looking at evidence and assembling evidence that would suggest there have been episodes in the past where there may have been multiple Tunguskas all happening at once. Maybe even hundreds or perhaps thousands. Swarms of Tunguskas. And the thing about that is a swarm of Tunguskas isn't going to leave the kind of graphic evidence in the landscape like a big impact does. And so what the inference is, the implication is that we've perhaps far underestimated the amount of encounters between Earth and things from space.
Do you call them neo-catastrophists?
Neo-catastrophists, yes. To distinguish them from the paleocatastrophists.
Well, I read an article the other day. They said they've identified now over 200.
12 miles in diameter that's 2.5 miles down. And it's only about 5,000 years old. The way they discovered it was they discovered evidence in Madagascar and Australia and New Zealand for tsunami waves that were over 600 feet high. And by studying the deposits, they were able to determine which direction the tsunami came from. And when they went and looked at that zone in the Indian Ocean, at the bottom of it there was a 12-mile hole. And when they dated the material that was the deep sea microfossils that got washed up onto land, they discovered that it was only a 5,000-year-old event. Now, think about that. We're talking about an object perhaps 1 to 2 miles in diameter falling in the Indian Ocean. Do you know what would happen if a 1 or 2 mile object diameter fell in any ocean on the world today? You could probably conservatively estimate that 1 billion people would be dead within a week. Now that's what we're talking about here. And this is what was being claimed to be Star Trek 20 or 30 years ago. But every bit of evidence that has accumulated since then has shown over and over and over again that this is very much a reality. And that we human species living on this earth are living under a cosmic timetable.
Well, isn't the evidence right now something like there's a situation like that every 50,000 years back through the history of the earth?
Oh, yeah, the further back we go, when you go back millions of years ago,
yeah, there's a lot more than there is now.
Well, you can see that, a big event like the Cretaceous Tertiary, where you have something the size of Mount Everest slamming into the earth, moving 20 miles per second. Okay, that creates a hole that might be 100 miles deep, ultimately, and 300 miles wide. And that's what essentially wipes out 3/4 of all life on the planet. Now, something like that occurring is probably not going to happen anytime soon.
No.
However, what is far more likely to happen is a much smaller event that wouldn't necessarily exterminate 3/4 of life on the planet, or even 1/4, even 10% of life on the planet, but could very effectively put human civilization right back in the Stone Age. And of course, we're not going to go back to the Stone Age without losing at least 25 to 50% of the planet's population, if not more.
Take care of the wars, huh?
It certainly would.
Randall,
Yes.
question. How old did they say the crater in the Indian Ocean was?
About 5,000, between 5,000 and 6,000 years old.
Would there be a connection between that and the Noah's flood?
Well, until I learned about that, I was always assuming that the Noahite flood account had its roots back in the Ice Age, and the massive flooding that occurred at the end of the Ice Age when sea level came up 400 feet. Now I believe, following Plato and the Egyptian priests that talked to Solon, that there had been multiple floods, and the flood of Noah and Deucalion were only the most recent floods. If you study a map, and I'm going to do this, put together a map showing Burkle Crater in the Indian Ocean, if you've got 600-foot tidal waves moving out from that crater, they're certainly going to go all the way to the northern end of the Indian Ocean, and they're going to move right up the Persian Gulf. Now, all the evidence suggests that Noah's flood, based upon the flood layers excavated by Sir Leonard Woolley, shows that some massive wave came from the south. Now, most of the critics of his assumption that that represented a Noahide flood said that, well, okay, what this represented was a regional flood because it's certainly not global in extent, which is true. But it is evidence that perhaps a very large flood wave moved up the Persian Gulf and swept up perhaps as far as Armenia. And what we're seeing when we see the rise of the Sumerian civilization, what we're seeing there is the date given for the rise of the Sumerian civilization shows up between 300 and 500 years after the Burckle crater event. So it's almost like human history. What we're perhaps seeing there is the rebooting of human history in the aftermath of that particular event.
And why does it say that the force regenerates very fastly? It's a couple slides back. What does that
Well,
mean?
that gets into the whole biological aspect of it, that, you know, there may very well be something introduced into the into the biosphere that can cause accelerated mutations.
Like biologic, or is it the minerals, the radium that speeds things up?
Good question, and that's something that I think is one of the next big important things that needs to be addressed, is the fact that there may be cosmic forces driving what we think of as Darwinian evolution, and this may be the thing that reconciles the creationists with the Darwinists, is that it's not a completely random process, but is actually being governed by extraterrestrial sources of energy and material that is being introduced into the biosphere by comets.
You know, Elizabeth, the other thing, since we were talking about extremophiles earlier, those extremophiles have a sequenceable DNA, and even if they don't take a hold in your body, it could be some of the DNA could be mutagen. You could have a DNA transfer into your body. It could hybridize between something that's not an extremo. There's all kinds of stuff.
All kinds of
DNA is
possibilities.
already
So we're
there.
only just on the threshold of beginning to learn about this.
Yeah.
But I definitely think this represents the emerging paradigm shift in trying to explain not only, you know, the mass extinctions and great convulsions in life within the history of the Earth, but also what happens in the aftermath. Because after the KT boundary event, you had 3/4 of all the species eliminated. Then after a hiatus, suddenly, as if by magic, you had this what the biologists refer to as a rapid speciation event, where all of a sudden these vacated ecological niches suddenly became filled with all of this incredible diverse animal and plant life that wasn't there before. Where did that stuff come from? Well, it may be something that was again triggered by something whose ultimate source was extraterrestrial. Here's just a little to kind of convey the idea. This is going back from the late 80s up until till about 2004. And each one of these represents close encounters that, you know, again, the vast majority of humanity is just oblivious to this. That, you know, this was in 2000. 9 objects have come close to Earth since 1991. That was in 2000, right? Current predictions for the number of potentially dangerous asteroids have been underestimated by at least 20%, say astronomers. According to recent calculations, there are between 750 and 900 asteroids circling the Earth with the potential to cause devastation on impact. But a researcher at the U.S.-based Massachusetts Institute of Technology says these predictions should be revised upwards on the basis of new data. And then right after that, we had on Saturday, 23rd of December 2000, an asteroid made a close approach. A large asteroid, 45 feet. Notice, 150 feet in diameter. What's that the same size as? Tunguska, yeah. Earlier that year, study raises number of dangerous asteroids. Scientists worry over, here's a year later in May. Scientists saying, look, this might actually be an issue we need to contend with, but getting absolutely zero attention from the political class, who've decided that this is just a non-issue, and they apparently are too concerned with looking like they're going to be eccentrics or something if they come out and actually speak to the populace and say, hey, this is actually a bigger issue than, for example, human-induced global warming.
Or Britney Spears?
Well, maybe not bigger than that. Because after all, she is a human being. Okay, January 9th, 2002. How many of you remember that? Right? That huge asteroid narrowly misses Earth? My guess is probably nobody. It was only 984 feet across. What would happen if a 984 foot 2001 YB5 passed Earth at 7:37 a.m.? For a moment, it was less than twice as far from the Earth as is the Moon. Scientists were unaware of its approach until a month ago, when it was spotted by an American observatory dedicated to tracking near-Earth objects. Astronomers insisted there was never any danger of collision with Earth, but they warned that the asteroid was one of up to 400,000 small near-Earth objects up to a kilometer in diameter. Now, if a kilometer diameter object struck the center of the United States, like say it landed in Kansas, well, we would all be dead here.
Yeah.
We would not necessarily be initially killed, but the rain out of debris falling back down from that impact would be igniting fires over the whole continent. But within 3 to 4 days, the sun would be blocked out to the extent that you probably couldn't, for several weeks, couldn't see your hand in front of your face. So you might just choke to death on the dust and the soot. Now that's an object that's 1,000 meters in diameter. That's the damage that it would do if it landed. If it landed in the ocean, well, it's going to create tsunami waves that are hundreds of feet high. And we have seen the kind of damage that a tsunami can do that's only a couple of dozen feet high, and how devastating that was. And here's another event. Large asteroid passes close to Earth. Oh no, this is the same one. An asteroid large enough to wipe out France hurtled past the Earth at a distance of 500,000 miles, just days after scientists spotted it.
Randall, do you suppose technology exists to divert the path of those?
Potentially it exists, yes. And that's, of course, what I'm obviously getting to here. That's what all this is clearly leading up to, is that there's 6 billion people on planet Earth right now, about the number needed to create a cosmic shield for planet Earth. And that's ultimately the vindication of the human species on this planet. Because of all the several million species of various kinds of life on this planet, only one of them has the capability to prevent or protect or shield the Earth from these kinds of events. Now, early in the history of a planet, a biological planet, these kinds of things are necessary, it would appear, especially if that's what's introducing life, what's introducing biology to a planet, an otherwise abiotic planet. But at some point, in order for the planet to keep evolving, the whole process has to be circumvented. And yes, that is what this is getting to.
Well, that's how the whole thing started back in the Precambrian days, 640 to 750 million years ago.
That's my point. Now, again, we're up to 2004. There's a 100-foot diameter. You see how many of these things have actually gone on. February 4th, 2005, asteroid 2004, MN4, a really near miss. These things have been going on, and it's just not on the radar screen of about 99.999% of the human species.
Probably a good thing. Everybody panicked.
Now, let's just read this one because it'll give us and then I'm going to go on to the new stuff. At midnight Greenwich Mean Time on August 10th, 1998, ML14 crossed the orbit of the Earth at the exact point that the latter had occupied 18 hours earlier. Had ML14 reached that point at 6 a.m. the previous morning, an area the size of France would have been totally devastated by 6:05. most of the world's vegetation would have been in flames by 8 o'clock, and 30 to 40% of the human race would have been dead or dying by late October.
Good heavens.
Now this isn't even that big of an object. Then we had another close on July 13th, 2029. Get this, mark this on your calendars, everybody.
Is that a
For all of
Friday?
us that are still here, we're going to have a big party. July 13th, so mark it on your calendars.
All right.
We're going to be 4 minutes and 46 seconds away from a planetary disaster. Now, unless something comes along between now and then to perturb this slightly, we're safe. But it's going to be a hell of a show. July.
That's one of the things that they're working on right now, is this one right here.
Apophis, that's the name, Apophis, Egyptian god of destruction. That's the name given to this thing.
And who is they working on it?
The whole government, the U.S. government,
Bush
there's a
is
lot of
involved,
stuff on
really?
the internet that they're asking for all kinds of ideas of how to go out there. All they have to do, if they get on the thing for 5 years before it shows up, and all they have to do is just push it enough, and they can move it out of the orbit. But they say it'll take 5 years of pushing to do it.
I think the technology exists now to do that.
Oh yeah. I mean, we are actually
Yes.
closer now to being
Yes.
able to do that than we were putting a man on the moon in 1960.
So why can't they use a Star Wars defense as Star Wars defense of big rocks?
Well, interestingly and ironically, that is one of the upsides of Star Wars research,
Exactly.
is
So it
because
should
all
be.
of that is giving us technologies that would ultimately allow us to deal with a cosmic threat like this.
But they'll scare the stew out of us prior to.
Friday the 13th, that's the day.
What is it?
Right. Lovely.
And then, briefly through this, let me get to the...
Is it 29?
Now, here's a quote from the British neocatac. This is new, Paul. This is new. Okay, a new quote. You've never seen this before.
All right.
Here's notice here, Victor Klube and Bill Napier in The Cosmic Winter. That was the book I told you about a month ago that you couldn't get now for less than $100. So long out of print. 1990. This is what they wrote. After discussing the sudden collapse of ancient civilizations and focusing in on the collapse of civilization in the Middle East, they commented this in their book. They said, complementing such an observational program, a fresh exploration of the past, armed now with the new astronomical understandings, is also necessary, not just for its own sake, but also to arrive at a better understanding of the risks. For example, one would like to find physical evidence to confirm or deny an astronomical catastrophe in the Near East in the second millennium BC. Now, at 1990, Klube and Napier were still considered on the fringe. Now, these were the guys who were predicting in 1980 that the real threat to Earth was fragmenting comets that created a whole big array of debris, a swarm. Well, with Shoemaker-Levy 9 in 94, they were pretty much vindicated on that account. Now, this is in 1990. They're still considered crackpots, right? Saying, we would like to find astronomical evidence associated with the collapse of civilizations in the Middle East in the second millennium BC. Well, then look what happened in 2001. Scientists have found the first evidence that a devastating meteor impact in the Middle East might have triggered the mysterious collapse of civilizations more than 4,000 years ago. Studies of satellite images of southern Iraq have revealed a 2-mile-wide circular depression which scientists say bears all the hallmarks of an impact crater. If confirmed, it would point to the Middle East being struck by a meteor with the violence equivalent to hundreds of nuclear bombs. Now, if this did in fact happen, and I'm going to guess I would put my money on it, because so far I've been betting all along for 20 years that the catastrophists are right, and I haven't lost yet. If this turns out to be correct, well, this is really a major impetus of history that has been completely overlooked. You will not open any history book on the history of civilization and find any reference to early civilization suddenly being aborted by a meteorite impact. not open any history book on the history of civilization and find any reference to early civilization suddenly being aborted by a meteorite impact. And yet it appears that that is actually the case. And it appears once again to vindicate the British neo-catastrophists.
Who went to war with them back then?
What?
So who went to war with Iraq back then?
Well, interestingly, the scientists wanted to get over and study this, but that whole plan sort of got put on the shelf. Separate group of scientists studying here. Scientists say comet smashed into southern Germany in 200 BC. Unleashing energy equivalent to thousands of atomic bombs. Here we're seeing finally, right around the turn of the millennium, some progressive astronomers are asking the question, did asteroids and comets turn the tides of civilization? And now the answer seems to be almost certainly, yes, they did, Virginia, they did. Now here, our discussion that we opened with, he's talking about the 6th century AD. Notice he mentions famine raged during the Dark Ages, pestilence spread, death came early and hard, dynasties died. Such a time came in the 6th century AD. The Dark Ages. We all learned about the Dark Ages in school, right? Well, Rome had been beaten back from its empire, art and science stagnated, even the sun turned its back. And there's dozens of quotes like this from this period. We marvel to see no shadows of our bodies at noon, to feel the mighty vigor of the sun's heat wasted into feebleness. Italian historian Flavius Cassiodorus wrote at the time, we have summer without heat. The crops have been chilled by north wind and the rain is denied. In
Now,
China,
if an object come in, where did it hit at in the 13th century though?
we'll get to that. The stars were lost from view for 3 months. The sun dimmed, the rain failed, and the snow fell in the summertime. Famine spread, and the emperor abandoned his capital amid political and economic disasters. Then came pestilence. The Justinian plague, named for a Byzantine empire, apparently began in Central Asia, spread into Egypt, and then swept across Europe. Hundreds of thousands died. The world had gone to hell in a hurry, if the historical accounts can be believed. But with neither evidence of global disaster nor a viable cause, the records were widely doubted by historians. But new evidence, however, supports the tales of ancient scribes and identifies brief but brutal times of worldwide ecological catastrophe. The evidence is in tree rings, which clearly show several years of cold weather. Now, actually, when you get into it, it appears that some of those tree rings show that over most of Europe, there was several years with no summer. Food systems collapsed. People got weak, and here comes the plague. Now, when we opened the discussion tonight, we were talking about the possibility of the very same factor, the cosmic dust that produces this darkening of the sun and the cold, also introducing microbes that could lead to the plague. Here's what I've got underlined. Let's emphasize that. What weapon does nature wield that is powerful enough to alter the course of civilizations within a few years? The most likely explanation, the best fit with the evidence, is that described by both Chinese and Europeans as dragons in the sky. Pieces of comets, or perhaps of asteroids, crashed into Earth, spewing a veil of dust that encircled the world and dimmed the sun. Now, what we find over and over again is the evidence that the dragon was the preeminent symbol utilized to represent the close encounters.
Question: If we have Star Wars and we can now protect ourselves from these things, then we're not going to get new sprouting of new life forms, and maybe that's what jumps us from one level to another.
Well, see, there's other factors now. And that's us. You know, if you want to look at this in the cosmic perspective, the way I see it is that over the lifespan of a galaxy, you may have, and this is something that we should have a lecture on, about the new evidence emerging about the likelihood of habitable planets. And it turns out that the conditions required for a habitable planet are very, very, very narrow indeed. And even now, as we're beginning to discover planetary objects around other solar systems, we're also seeing that those planetary objects don't look anywhere remotely like they would be suitable for the emergence of higher life. I mean, like we're discovering planets, for example, that are the size of Jupiter. Well, higher life is not going to form on a planet the size of Jupiter. The gravity would crush anything that tried to go beyond the microbial state. You know, there's a very narrow range. And the way I read the Akashic records, if you want, is that there's plenty of incipient biotic planets forming. But what happens is they get to a threshold that requires a quantum leap. And that quantum leap is that the biological life, the biosphere, has to move from being purely terrestrial based to becoming celestial, to becoming cosmic. And there has to be a way, nature has to have some type of a strategy for accomplishing that. And I believe, as far as here on planet Earth, we humans are the strategy by which nature will accomplish that. Nature is trying to diversify its life to create it, to put it into a much more invulnerable position with respect to these cosmic catastrophes, and we are the agency by which nature will affect that strategy. We're the only agency by which that could happen. And clearly, what is the point of even being concerned about human-induced pollution and human-induced defilement of the environment if it turns out that what we're doing is a mosquito bite compared to this stuff? And it is. Right. It is. The kind of devastation and pollution and complete destruction of the environment that would take place in one of these events goes so far beyond anything that we humans, paltry humans, have yet done, that there's really almost no way to compare the events.
But let's say that Star Wars does get to a place where it can shoot these things down, then we can save the planet. And yet, if we save the planet, we got to clean it up from people that are destroying it.
Well, that's my point, is that the planet, obviously, is a whole lot more robust than we had imagined. I mean, if we're talking 5,000 years ago, an object moving at 20 miles per second slammed into the Indian Ocean and created tsunamis 600 to 800 feet high and gouged a hole 12 mile wide in the floor of the ocean. I mean, do you realize what kind of damage that's going to do to the global environment? Now, what I'm trying to get at is one event like that. Here, by comparison, try to imagine how much damage would be affected to the global environment by an all-out nuclear war. If we blasted everything we had, China blasted everything it had, India, Russia, all of us decided to shoot off every nuclear weapon we had, that still would pale in comparison to even a small cosmic event. We're talking right now maybe 5,000 to 6,000 megatons in the total global nuclear arsenal. One small event the size of a kilometer would be hundreds of times more forceful than that. Now, can you imagine, is there anything that we have done yet that has even remotely approached an all-out nuclear war in its consequences to the environment? No, there isn't. Nothing. Now, what I'm getting at is an all-out nuclear war pales almost into insignificance compared to one of these events. And again, this is not some science fiction pie-in-the-sky Star Trek episode. This is the reality that's going to force the human race to finally grow up. We have to come to terms with this, or there will be no future for our children and our grandchildren. It's that simple. And we're in hysterics over a background enhancement of 0.0008% of CO2. It's nuts. It's completely nuts. That's my take on it.
Well, the only temperature of the Earth is only warmed up 1.2 degrees, and that's a natural thing that happens all the time.
And they also are talking about, they're complaining about pollution from human sulfur. Well, the sulfur and the CO2 balance each other, and now I've never heard them once even talk about that.
Right. Now, I don't want anybody to misread this and say, hey, Randall's up there saying it's okay if we pollute and throw our trash in the streams. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. I absolutely believe we need to be good stewards of this planet, much better than we have been. And we have to learn from our mistakes. But we also have to realize that this industrial phase of civilization that we're in now is merely a temporary phase. And it's a phase we have to go through in order to get life off the planet.
But it makes us want to even protect the planet more because it's such a rare,
Yes!
it's a rare
Yes!
likelihood of
Yes.
harboring higher intelligent life.
Yes. Okay. Let's proceed on before we run out of time.
That was very good, Randall.
This we're talking about here is what I've been saying all along, but we can't lose our sense of humor about the whole thing, okay? If it turns out that you walk out of your house one afternoon or evening in the next few weeks or months and you look up in the sky and you see it heading towards us, hey, say, wow, this is going to be a great show, but...
Goodbye.
Yeah, sure, yeah. That's right.
And if you do yoga, you can do it easier.
Now, if I have anything to say about it, that ain't going to happen. But, hey, I didn't think a year ago that necessarily Ron Paul was going to get as much attention that he's gotten. I'd almost given up on the freedom movement in this country, and suddenly it's come alive again.
Yeah.
This is very exciting.
They make it yet.
Yeah. Here we have a radiant. This represents meteors flying out of the radiant. It's like we're looking up a cosmic tunnel, and all of this stuff is barreling down the cosmic tunnel, the cosmic highway, and when we pass through it, we see this stuff flying at us. Here's a time lapse of the Leonids, and can you see if you follow these traces here? These are the stars, the fixed stars, but these at angles are the meteors coming in from this area of space. They're shooting in.
The ones coming at us are shooting.
They're coming at us. Yeah, it's like looking up railroad tracks. Let's see this one. Yeah, here is showing the constellation of Leo with the radiant superimposed. It's pretty clear that when you look at this, ancient peoples looking at a meteor shower like this would associate it with. There's very interesting legends. Howard Weiss, in his appendixes to his book on the Great Pyramid, recorded lots of ancient legends that I've never seen anywhere else. And he talks about like the dream of King Surid. Have you ever heard that? Who in a lot of the legends is given credit for building the Great Pyramid. The dream of King Surid was that he dreamt that a great dragon breathing fire was going to come out of the constellation of Leo and cause a great conflagration that would then be caused by a flood. And in order to preserve the science and knowledge and wisdom of his day, he built a Great Pyramid as a memorial, as a time capsule.
Was he a certain time that he lived historically?
That's vague. I mean, he's a legendary figure. Some say, well, maybe he was Khufu. Here's a Leonid fireball. Now, this is what happens when an object maybe the size of a basketball comes in to the atmosphere. And it's got a little baby coming in with it. See, a cute little thing on the side there.
Oh, hey, Randall, if you can go back to shows. The one before that was, yeah, look at it.
This is looking across.
That's really.
So the bright star ones are the ones coming at us. The circles.
No, none of them are coming at us.
Oh.
We're looking across,
Okay.
the thing here.
I gotcha.
Oops.
They're going over towards Sam.
Yeah.
What's the smallest object that will enter the atmosphere that won't burn up?
Oh, probably 20 to 30 feet. Somewhere. It depends. It depends a lot on what the object's made out of. Because you can have almost like a lightweight, almost like a pumice rock. You can have a snowball, or you can have a heavy rock, or a piece of cast iron. Now, if it's on the denser end of the spectrum, it can be a lot smaller and hit the surface.
It could be ice.
But ice is fragile and is going to break up a lot more readily. Now, there's a very interesting photograph taken by a high school student. I think, where was that again? Australia, I believe. Now, you look at that, you can almost begin to see how the image of a fire-breathing dragon and how ancient people seeing events like this would use the dragon as a symbol. And then we talked about the Great Taurid Meteor shower, and this is the one that I generally attribute to the Ice Age. We saw this graphic. We'll look at it real close. Briefly again. Sun, Mercury, Venus. Here's the orbit of Earth going this way around the Sun. And here's a couple of the Taurid meteors going around the sun. And this date here would be spring equinox. If you see, there's the sign of Aries. So as the Earth is crossing, when the sun has entered the sign of Aries, that's spring equinox. So this is going to be around March 21st. And then as it comes around here, right around late June, it's going to be passing this area. So you can see any object coming from this way is going to be coming right from the direction of the sun. And this is what we were crossing on late June of 1908 when a piece of this Taurid stream hit the Earth, or hit the Earth's atmosphere and blew up. Then coming around, here we would be crossing fall equinox, and in here we're getting to late October, early November. And this is where we catch the stuff from the backside, and this is where our Halloween comes in. And Halloween, you remember, was the universal ancient Day of the Dead. And this is the scientist that first figured out that Tunguska was part of the Taurid stream. So I'm going to speed through all of this. Paul, I'm going to give you a... Do you have this? Well, you don't have the updated version, so I'll give you a new version of this. So,
Randall, how come some of them bounce off, like that picture you showed? You know, the Tetons?
think about this. Okay, all you got to do is think about this. Go out and take a rock and drop it into a lake. It goes right in, right? But if you throw it at a low angle, you know, everybody skipped rocks off of the pond, right? It's the same principle. If it comes in at a shallow angle and hits the atmosphere, it can actually skip off.
Now, how do you know from the like the moon, where you can see where the asteroids have pummeled the moon? How do you know it's like 10 coming down versus one hop skipping?
Oh,
what's the difference?
Because there's no way one would hop and skip.
Because it's too forceful?
Yes, it's going to completely obliterate on impact.
It won't do like on the water.
No.
Okay.
No. Okay, I'm going to go on. I don't know how many of you guys would like to get a copy of this to study on your own. Well, just let me know. Okay. I have actually one copy tonight. And I think I owe you one, don't I, Leah?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I didn't forget.
I know.
I actually brought it for you, and you weren't here the next week.
Next week?
The week after
okay.
you. Okay, so the Taurid, here's a nice picture of a Taurid fireball. We're going to go speeding through this because I want to get to the new stuff. Okay, here we have cometary catastrophes, cosmic dust, and ecological disasters in historical times, the astronomical framework. Available data from fireball and comet observations, meteorite impacts, small lunar craters, and current near-Earth environment are assembled to yield a coherent picture of the interface between the Earth and its current interplanetary environment. The Taurid complex of meteors, meteoroids, asteroids, and comet anki has probably been a significant and regularly visible celestial hazard from the last ice age through to the present day. These data lead to the expectation that history has been punctuated by 1. Tunguska-like impacts, singly or as part of fireball swarms. 2. Freezing events of decadal duration due to cometary dusting of the stratosphere. And 3. Occasional disastrous inundations of coastal areas due to small body ocean impacts. Now notice that he's taking this complex of stuff all the way back into the Ice Age. Now, here we have a cave painting from 14,500 years ago during the Ice Age, right? Now, let's see here. Look at this. And what do you see? What's it a painting of?
Cars.
Sure. Now,
Belt of Orion in front
where's the belt of Orion?
Those dots in front of it.
Above the bull.
Yes. And what's this?
That's the Pleiades.
There's the Pleiades.
Okay.
Now, somebody perhaps taking refuge in a cave 14,500 years ago, painted an effigy of Taurus the bull on the wall. This may have a heretofore unappreciated significance.
It's appreciated.
And exactly this whole stereotype of the caveman. Well,
Not so much.
if you were wanting to take refuge from things happening in the sky, from atmospheric explosions, where would you go? An obvious choice would be going into a cave. Absolutely. Okay, so show you this very briefly, and then I want to get to at least introduce you to the Mayans' take on all of this, because
We're going to have to start bringing it to a close here, Sergeant.
already. I'm just getting warmed up.
I know you are.
All right, here we have radiant points of various cosmic entities. Here's the sun, and this is one of the key pieces of evidence by which scientists figured out. See where the radiant point of the Taurids is? And you see the letter Z? That's where in space the Tunguska object came from. So you can see it's pretty darn close.
Oh, so it's in the same doodah.
Yeah.
Oh, look, there's a circle cave.
Okay, we're going to save this.
Oh, biogenesis. Oh, that sounds really cool.
It is.
Well, are we going to do that?
If you're really nice. If you don't piss me off.
I have never pissed you off. Have I?
Not yet.
There you go. One of the few.
Okay. God. Oh well. God, see, I've still only shown you guys a fraction of what
That
I've
looks
got
interesting.
here.
Oh, stop. Man.
I think what we need to do is start meeting every night for a couple of months, and then I can.
My nerves wouldn't take that.
I know you couldn't stand that much
encouraged him.
intensity, could you?
Encouraged him. Give him a
Okay.
15-minute time frame.
Just some examples here. Mexican Codex, a meteor as a cosmic serpent descending from the sky. And you see the knight there, or the warrior going about to do battle with the cosmic
Now, with
serpent.
the stars in there, what constellation are the stars in that thing?
Where'd it go?
Shush. I can ask questions.
That's a good question. I don't know. This I don't know. Here's a European version of it. This is from Theatricum Cometicum. This is the traditional European depiction of the comet as a cosmic serpent. Here's another version of it. Meteor is a descending dragon. Turns out that there's lots and lots and lots of these representations of cosmic objects with dragons. And then, of course, our own famous serpent here in Ohio. How many of you guys have been to Serpent Mound yet? I've been telling you, go to Serpent Mound. Here's the serpent effigy. And what you don't realize, most people don't realize when they visit this, you look at this, the serpent is actually sitting on the back of a big serpent. You see, here's the serpent winding, the human-created serpent. Well, look, here's the body of the geomorphic serpent, and here's his head right here.
And
Now,
it's on the edge of a 4-mile wide.
well, yes, that's what I'm about to get to. Over to over on this side, to this side here, this is facing south. Over to this way, which is to the west, is as Bill was saying, there's a 4-mile impact scar that most of the geologists have studied to think it was caused by a comet. Now, I find it more than just coincidental that one of the largest serpent effigies in the world, and the largest in North America, is built on the rim of some type of an impact crater.
But you don't think that's unusual, because I would imagine it's done in other areas too.
What?
You know, the impact is a perfect, or not a circle, but it's a nice circle to build these kind of things around it.
Not necessarily.
Can
See,
you
there's
that?
also notice it's built at the confluence of. There's a lot of interesting natural features that come together right at this place. But in terms of the geomantic and geomagnetic energies and so forth at a site like this, very interesting. And we're getting into a whole possibility of an esoteric science here.
What's the date of the impact?
The data, this is old, like over 300 million years old.
Can you see that from Google Earth when you do a?
Yes, you can. It's not distinct like some of them, but you can see it. If somebody shows it to you, which either Brad or I could do, you would see it. But if you go to Serpent Mound, you can find Serpent Mound on Google Earth. Just Serpent Mound sits on the southwestern rim, if I'm remembering it, southwestern rim. And then turns out like here, the red dragon, this is the flag of Wales, ancient Wales.
Do they have?
which, as it
any-
turns out, the Dark Ages comet probably hit whales.
Okay.
That's the contending theory right now.
Cool.
And it turns out that the very name that they used for the red dragon also meant, translated as lightning stone, but it also meant meteorite.
Cool.
Yeah. So there's lots and lots of this evidence like this. The things that were used as symbols to represent meteorites: hair, beams, beards. I did a whole list of them. And these are all ancient accounts, legends. All this part here is about legends, comet types. If we had more time.
Is this next class?
Yeah, we're going to pick this up. And this is the lead into the Mayans. Because, see, here's the most comprehensive list of ancient symbols that were used to indicate comets, meteorites, or fireballs. Right here. If you can remember this list, I guarantee you can go back and start rereading some of the ancient sacred writings, some of the legends and so forth, and it'll open up a whole new level of meaning to you. Swords, spears, and arrows, beams, burning torches, burning lamps, thunderbolts. The swastika was a very prominent ancient symbol that was used for a spinning comet nucleus. The broom, the sweeping away of the old. Stones from the sky. Chariot, as in the myth of Phaeton, where the fireball, the meteorite, was symbolized by Phaeton's chariot. Also a scythe and a sickle. And you notice how often death is always depicted as carrying a sickle, right?
That's interesting.
Well, now that this opens up a new level of meaning for that. And the myth of Phaeton. Phaeton with his hair on fire. So anytime now that you begin to see these symbols, look for a new layer of meaning. The hair is associated with a comet. So let me just show you very quickly what we'll pick up at next time. You know, if Paul would just keep me on track.
Yeah, Paul. Time frames.
Okay.
I need a whip for a stick or something.
We will look at some of this
You
stuff.
can just hit him on the butt.
Okay, take a look. Babylonian cuneiform, cylinder seals. Who can look at that and see where the symbol of comets is hiding up there?
Right now.
Where is the symbol of comets in this? It's hiding. It's hiding. I showed this to you. Where is it? Omega. There's two of them right here. The Omega symbol. The Omega symbol. Now, I am the Alpha and Omega. The mystery of the seven stars with the angel holds in his right hand. I guarantee once you begin to grasp this information, you cannot go back and read the book of Revelations without seeing a whole new dimension of meaning. And so we're going to look at some of these ancient stuff like the cylinder seals, rock art, petroglyphs take on a new meaning. And then we will get into this. Okay, let's keep going here. Mithraism, which we've only briefly talked about a little bit in here. The symbolism of the Mithraic mysteries and the Eleusinian mysteries. Amazing stuff in there. You've seen that. Let me keep going, and get to the Mayan stuff, and you'll... Yeah. Now, in Christianity, it's hidden in a place that you probably not even expected, but once you begin to recognize it, it makes perfect sense. When you start reading about the devil, Lucifer, the Antichrist, I always, years ago, before I ever knew about any of this stuff, I used to puzzle over the fact that Lucifer meant the bringing of the light, the bringer of the light. And I thought, well, if Lucifer is evil, why is he described as somebody bringing light? Right?
Not evil.
Rosalind Chap, well, depends. It all depends, see. Because this whole thing can go either way, depending on our response to it. If we do nothing, yeah, it's probably going to be an evil consequence. But see, Lucifer, the fall of Lucifer is a key element of the whole Judeo-Christian tradition. Here he is shown bound and falling in Rosalind Chapel. But you see, then what I do is we'll get into actually analyzing the original language used in these ancient writings. But there are many depictions of these demons and things that are falling to earth from the sky. And then what we did from there was we went to the Mayan stuff, and give me one more minute, Sam, just to get down here to show you where we're going.
Don't get into that Mayan stuff tonight. We'll start
Oh,
that
I'm not.
in January.
I'm
to
not
start with.
going to get into it tonight. But just this, only a sneak preview.
Yeah,
Only the sneak
preview.
preview.
Sure, we wanna see a little bit.
That's right, Verlaine. Mayan and Aztec stuff is full of this same kind of symbolism. I just briefly showed you this whole concept of the fall of Satan and these demons falling. Well, that's the old world. When we come to the new world, we find the exact same thing depicted in all kinds of different ways. A ceramic vase from 1200 AD showing a diving god holding in his hands something which we'll get into next time. At Tulum, he's pretty much defaced, but that was a diving god. At Seil, you can see up there in the center another diving god. A diving dog with flaming torches from the Dresden Codex. Zantamok, the fallen god from Codex Borgia, with the rattlesnake glyph, which is the symbol for the Pleiades. There's lots and lots of this. A diving monkey figure.
Wasn't that 7 stars around him too?
Yeah, I'm going to just, the base of the falling lord, the hanged man. See, we could go on and on here. I've got lots of this stuff talking about the Mayans, and the Mayans have preserved a very major chunk of this tradition for us in their ceremonies and so forth. So next, in 2 weeks, or when are we meeting again?
So then, are you going to wrap it back into this on the Seal spaceship on how this stuff all fits into how we need to create this and get it off? Because that seems like another place.
Well, you know,
Yeah, I mean, you're
the deal is this, Elizabeth. I mean, if you're gonna solve a problem, the first thing you do is you try to learn as much as you can about that problem.
Right, right.
And that's what we're doing. And in fact, I would argue that in learning about the nature of the problem, the solution in a sense, presents itself to us.
I agree.
Yeah. And I do believe that the ancient legacy from all kinds of sacred traditions actually conveys very critical information that will help us understand. And that, in fact, is a big part of it. You saw the quick flashes up there of St. George battling the dragon? The Holy Grail. Once you've seen all this, the Holy Grail, the story of the Holy Grail is going to take on a whole new dimension of meaning. And we've only touched upon that, but I have a whole presentation just on the Holy Grail.
Why don't we do you once a week?
Well, thank you tonight.
Wait a minute.
When are we meeting?
Yes,
Randall.
ma'am.
All right, second day of January. That'll be the next meeting
Wednesday,
with
second day of
Randall.
January.
Okay.